Hi, welcome back. Alena, can you hear us? You need to unmute yourself.
Yes, I hear you.
Excellent. Who else is on this panel? Online? Just one person? Okay, we have at least. Okay, you are on this panel as well. And yes, please. Do you have slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Standard slides.
Yeah. Let's see. Can you see yourself here in the list?
Yes, it's just the above.
This one?
Yes.
Good. And Curt, you need to sit here.
Yes, I know.
It's not very visible, but
Yeah, I think
I see nothing now.
that's okay. We are not showing anything yet. And who is speaking first?
I speaking first, but I don't see all my colleagues.
Okay, you cannot see that camera. Let me see why. We do not need it here, but who is second speaker?
me.
Okay, so you can attach.
Okay.
You should be able to see us. There's a camera, a different camera. I suggest that you start, of course.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to section 2.2, which is devoted to various aspects of language in Belarus. I'm Curt Woolhiser from the Department of Belarusian Studies at the University of Warsaw, and I'll be moderating our session today. So I guess each of our speakers will have approximately 15 minutes for their presentation, and then we'll leave the remaining time for questions and discussion. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our first speaker, Dr. Alena Rudenka of the Institute of Slavic Studies at the Polish Academy of Sciences, who, as you can see, will be joining us online. Dr. Rudenka will be speaking on the topic of polylingualism, polyethnicity, and polyconfessionalism of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Dr. Rudenka?
Yes, I'm here, and I'll try to show you my presentation. You see it, yeah?
Yes.
So, first of all, good afternoon, dear colleagues. It is so pleasant to see you just in screen, but I am very glad to be at such a meeting. As Professor Woolhiser told, I'll speak today about polylingualism and polyethnicity of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Do you see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
But if you go to the slide show mode, that will be even better.
Excuse me, maybe it's enough because when I have slide mode, I don't see myself.
Do you need to see yourself?
Now I see myself. Okay.
Yeah.
So Europe developed and develops now as a multinational and tolerant entity that promotes ethnic, linguistic, and religious pluralism. Today, multiculturalism are stable and integral component of the European worldview. However, How did this worldview come about? The historical prototype of European inter-ethnic cooperation and tolerance was the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Just a second. The Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the GDL, was an ancient state that emerged from the union of Lithuanian and Slavic principalities in the middle of the 13th century. In the 2030s, 40s, the Principality of Novgorod, under the rule of Mindaugas, began to expand rapidly, annexing the lands of neighboring Baltic and Slavic principalities. As a result, it encompassed all the present-day Belarus and Lithuania, as well as parts of present-day Ukraine, Russia, Poland, Latvia, Estonia, and Moldova. From the 14th century, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania became the largest European state. The GDL is a good laboratory of ethnic, language, and religious diversity. The GDL represents a model for European integration, and I try to show it through phenomenon of hybrid texts. A hybrid text is created by influence of two or more languages. The range of languages spoken in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania is wide. Among the Indo-European languages, there are Slavic, Baltic, Germanic, Latin, Armenian, Greek, and Romani. Among non-European languages, we can name Turkish, Semitic, and Finno-Ugric languages. Of the Slavic languages of the GDL, Polish, Czech, Slavonic, and Prostamova should be mentioned. Prostamova, or Ruthenian, was the official written language. In addition, there were oral East Slavic dialects that occasionally appeared in the written texts. The expression Prostamova is the calque from the Latin lingua rustica. Tony, it's not such a simple speaking. We can judge the past primarily by texts. Texts from the Grand Duchy of Lithuania were often hybrid, that is, written with the influence of two or more languages. Such hybrid texts have always been perceived by society and the humanities and as errors or marginal cases. I try to demonstrate that hybrid texts are the norm in multilingual communities, ensuring their stability and inter-ethnic cooperation. So I try to reconstruct the prototype of European pluralism through the study of hybrid texts of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. It is necessary to pay attention to the fact that in 14th, 18th centuries, the Eastern Slavs lived in politically, socially, and culturally different states. Moscovite Rus, its for Russian ancestors, and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, ancestors of Ukrainians and Belarusians. It caused key differences between Russians on the one hand and Belarusians and Ukrainians on the other. The self-determination of Belarusians and Ukrainians as European nations is largely due to this initial stage of the ethno-lingual cultural development. I focus today on hybrid Slavic language texts in the GDL. They can be original or translated. Different languages, Slavic and non-Slavic, living and dead, and dialects, Belarusian, Ukrainian, came into contact with each other. They can be written in different alphabets. Such texts are especially typical for the ethnic minorities of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Armenians, Tatars, Jews, and so on. Today, I can give you only some examples of hybrid texts in the Slavic languages. In the early period of the Principality, the religious literature was represented by Czech Slavonic. By acquiring certain East Slavic features, it came closer to local dialects. This slide shows you one of the first translation of the Gospel into Czech Slavonic. It was in Kievan Rus area. This Ostromir's Gospel contains East Slavic features. There are also more complex cases of Bible translations, such as the works of Francis Skaryna, which mix Czech Slavonic with Prostamova, containing many Bohemisms, Latinisms, and Germanisms. You see it, the first page on presentation. In the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Orthodox Christians used translated confessional literature in the Czech Slavonic language, while secular literature was translated into Prostamova. As example of translated secular literature, an example is so-called Vilninsky Zbornik or Vilna collection from the National Library of Belarus. It includes a translation of the renowned work Secretum Secretorum, which is a tribute to the Aristotle, as well as 16 less known unpublished texts on astrology. The language of the manuscript Prostamova constitutes a mosaic of Polish, Czech, Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Czech Slavonic, and other elements, providing a vivid illustration of a hybrid text. You see this collection is very nice. Yeah, there are such pictures near the text. The example of hybrid text that mixed Slavic languages are Ruthenian Polish Latinographic texts. These were both translations and originals. The slide shows a fragment of the famous statute of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and its translation into Polish. If you know the Cyrillic alphabet, you see that they are almost word-to-word identical, although the letter text is considered a translation. This interpretation still persists. What is written in the Latin alphabet is considered Polish, and what is written in Cyrillic is considered Ruthenian. In the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and later in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, hybrid texts were produced by both Slavs and non-Slavs. The ethnic group known as Lithuanian Tatars inhabits the territories of modern-day Lithuania, Belarus, and Poland. This group formed in the 14th, 16th centuries as a result of emigration from the Golden Order. From the 17th century onwards, some of them moved to the Kingdom of Poland. The Tatars of the GDL created their own literature in Arabic, Turkish, Ruthenian, and Polish. All of these texts are written in the Arabic alphabet. I show you examples of Slavic language texts. For example, this text at presentation is written in Ruthenian. Now you see the tefsir from Alytus, dated 1723. This text presents a copy of the first translation of the Quran into Slavic language. Despite numerous deviations from a norm and a strong Arabic influence, the language of the tefsir can be classified as Polish. The first translation of tefsir into Polish was made in 1686. Some Arabographic texts contain Polonisms, Orientalisms, a large number of words of East Slavic origin, and even Czech Slavonic lexemes. A good example of this is a small manuscript on traditional medicine. You see it on presentation, yeah? Armenian communities began to emerge in Poland around the middle 14th century. The largest colonies were in Kamenets-Podilsky and Lviv. Since the 16th century, Armenians wrote in Polish with Kipchak and Armenian elements using the Armenian script. Let's see the recently published book by Denis Liseychikov and Eugen Klinsky as an example. This book is dedicated to the father and son Madjarskis, who organized the production of the renowned Slutsk belts in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. As well as telling the story of this famous father and son, the book contains interesting linguistic information. The father and son Madjarskis wrote in Armenian and Polish using the Armenian alphabet and in Polish using the Latin alphabet. And at this slide, you see their notes and the linguistic commentary to these notes. Almost 70% of these notes is in Polish language. Examples of hybrid texts in Slavic languages were given above. Other ethnic minorities, such as Jews or Karaites, wrote in their own languages and they use the Hebrew alphabet. You see some examples at presentation, and I would like only to add that hybrid non-Slavic texts such as Lithuanian, Ruthenian not have been discussed here. Similarly, in Polish Latin, Polish Lithuanian, and Lithuanian Latin hybrid texts are the subject of separate investigations. Traces of hybridization between Prostamova and the Lithuanian language can be found in the texts. Arturas Dubonis discusses the use of Lithuanian words in official documents of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania written in Russian, Latin, and Polish. First of all, in famous Lithuanian metrics. And you see at slide an example from these Lithuanian metrics where the sentence in Lithuanian is written with Cyrillic alphabet. The spread of hybrid texts is the best confirmation of the multi-ethnicity and multilingualism of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. The linguistic landscape of the GDL is not unique. It is more difficult to find a non-hybrid poor text than a hybrid one. The experience of the GDL clearly demonstrates that hybrid texts are not merely marginal curiosities, but instruments of cultural mediation and integration. Thank you very much for your attention.
Next up is Dr. Tatsiana Nazaranka from the University of Salzburg in Austria, whose paper is entitled When Myths Code Reality, Belarusian Metalinguistic Discourse and its AI Legacy.
Yes.
I switch it off, yeah?
Yeah, I already did, thank you. So can you say what to move forward in my
Okay.
So, one of the most striking features of Belarusian is its discontinuous written tradition. So, as we saw, and Dr. Rudenko had shown us that very vividly, it flourished between the 14th and the 16th century. Then Belarusian vanished for 200 years before being revised on a new basis. The rise and fall of that first tradition was a missed opportunity for standardization from above. Its revival in the late 20th century represents standardization from below. In the 1920s, the process shifted again from below to above, consolidating by the 1933 decree, often seen as the first official attempt to codify Belarusian norms. My talk examines the consequences of this shift, focusing on the emergence of Tarashkevitsa and Narkamovka and the nature of the gap between them, and on how metalinguistic myths about Belarusian standardization are formed and circulated in public discourse, and how they are ultimately reflected and reproduced in AI systems. Very briefly, let me outline the theoretical framework. Meta-discourse can be understood as talk about talk, while metalinguistic discourse refers more specifically to the use of language to reflect on language itself. Standardization is therefore inherently a metalinguistic process, and at the same time, it is never purely linguistic, but also a social and political phenomena. Haugen classic model describes standardization as a process involving selection, codification, elaboration, and acceptance. Claus later reinterpreted this as two complementary processes, corpus planning and status planning. Corpus planning, selection, and codification is typically carried out by linguists, while status planning, elaboration, and implementation is usually in the hands of states and institutions. The directions in which standardization develops may be from above and from below. Following Elspeth's standardization from above is a process in which authorities successfully implement certain language varieties and variants to become the standard in a nation state. It is a case of top-down language planning, usually resulting in concrete prescription and proscription activities. By contrast, standardization from below happens without direct intervention from authorities. The basis for standardization from below lies in oral registers and the language use of members of the lower ranks of society in language history. The results of standardization is a standard variety which, unlike a non-standard one, is codified, formally taught, has official status, and is supported by institutional actors. So in case of Belarusian, we are speaking about Narkamovka and Tarashkevitsa. From the perspective of language standardization, Tarashkevitsa represents a case of standardization from below, based on spoken usage and lacking stable institutional support. The selection of norm was based on spoken speech, while codification incorporated the variation of forms. However, the main obstacle to status planning was the lack of stable statehood. The acceptance of Tarashkevich's codified form remained limited and, in Labov terms, below the level of social awareness. So, in other words, there was corpus planning, but not effective status planning. This can be attributed to the fact that until 1939, Western Belarus remained under Polish rules, where the situation unfolded in several ways. First of all, brutal Polonization, openly described in reports of voivodes who stressed the political role of schools in assimilation. Then, schooling statistics. Belarusian schools made up less than 1%, and by the late 1930s, Belarusian schooling had almost disappeared. So, use of Tarashkevich's grammar itself. Although recommended in 1925, it was missing from the Polish ministry official list. And the last but not the least, print runs of Tarashkevich's grammar. Even though this grammar was published in several editions, none of them indicates their print runs. So by contrast, in the Bersa, Belarusian had state status. Norms were implemented through local grammars, not Tereshkevich's books. Losik's practical grammar appeared in 1921 with 10,000 copies, and his pravopis of 1924 was reissued at least 8 times, each with 50,000 copies. Inspired by Tereshkevich, Losik's system nevertheless diverged in important ways. By 1930, the Polish ministry official list even included Ostrogorski pravopis underscoring parallel codification lines, Tereshkevich's and Losik's. So we can say that the decree 1933 was not a rupture between a classical Tereshkevitsa and new Narkamovka, except perhaps the narrow domain of orthography, and only if we reduce Tereshkevitsa to a particular orthographic habit and Latin script usage. So it wasn't directly against Tereshkevich's codified form as such, but rather against the unstable intermediate variety in which the 1918 from below codification had evolved after more than a decade of unrevised use under condition of statehood. The perception of Narkamovka as a Russified standard is not fully supported by the empirical evidence. Instead, it functions as a metalinguistic myth and entrenched in scholarly discourse and increasingly reproduced in social media. One popular post in Instagram, for example, claims that the feminine plural ending, au yau, was replaced by ye in the 1933 decree, even though the view appears in scholarly works. So we have it here. The evidence contradicts it. The pravopis of 1934, published as a direct result of the 1933 decree, explicitly list in the Rule 52 that both endings, ye and au ya, are legitimate. The ending ye is not a product of Russification. In the genitive plural, it predominates in Belarusian words derived with the suffix ast, ost, as evidence in Nasha Niva, for example. So here. The Belarusian grammars of 1957 and 1962 codified both endings as acceptable, and only the grammar of 1985 restricted ye to nouns with the stems ending in a consonant cluster. The interpretation is also confirmed. By my own analysis of primary sources. I described 10 episodes of the program Своими словами and 10 episodes and 20 episodes of program Surazmovцы, both programs devoted to the Belarusian language and culture. In total, I found 7 examples of feminine nouns in ast, ost in the genitive plural, where in the genitive plural appeared. So their distribution matches the rule of the latest Grammar on the Belarusian Language of 2007, which stresses the ending au yau as expanding in modern speech. So at the same time, I've analyzed 1,194 Instagram posts and 1,094 comments. The results show clear symmetry. Tereshkevitsa in orthography and in some grammar examples occur primary in posts, while comments tend to follow the official standard. So in the new AI environment, unstable standardization, the relationship between Tereshkevitsa and Narkamovka and the role of Russian influence take the form of a chain of interconnected problems. So first of all, Belarusian is considered as low-resource language with limited digital and media representation. So as shown by Koschenko and Martysiuk, the spread of machine translation has fundamentally altered the nature of Belarusian language text. A large proportion of available texts today are not originally produced in Belarusian, but are translations from Russian. Structurally, these texts often represent what can be described as Russian with Belarusian words. This phenomena closely resembles what is commonly referred to as Trasyanka, a mixed Belarusian-Russian speech, but in a technologically mediated form, a kind of Trasyanka 2.0, which is no longer produced by speakers, but generated and stabilized by algorithmic systems. In fact, the situation has reached a point where machine-translated text dominate the available data to such an extent that the development of the purely synchronic corpus of the Belarusian language had to be put on hold. This situation also raises a broader methodological question. While the exact composition of training data used by large language models is not publicly available, it's reasonable to assume that for low-resource languages such as Belarusian, the available data pool inevitably includes a significant proportion of machine-translated and other low-quality online text. At the same time, access to systems such ChatGPT had been limited in Belarus due to the restrictions from the OpenAI side. So it also restricts the possibility of user-driven correction and feedback. This further reduced the chances of improving the quality of Belarusian such systems. So this pattern is directly reflected in the following experiments. The experiments were carried out in June 2024 using GPT-4o model, which was in use till February 2026. The first experiment accesses GPT ability to recognize, analyze, and generate accurate Belarusian text on the linguistic topic Tarashkevitsa Narkamovka, and the experiment 2 evaluates the potential the default GPT models to provide linguistic feedback. The first experiment tested the model's ability to recognize and explain two concepts, Narkamovka and Tarashkevitsa. So in two separate chats, I asked the same question in two different languages, Russian and Belarusian, and you see the model performs differently depending on the language of interaction. Of course, you don't see it, but if you want, I can send you a presentation. So sorry, it's just difficult to see. So in Russian, the model produced factual errors. It limits Tarashkevitsa to a variety rooted solely in Western Belarusian dialects and classified Narkamovka as criminal slang, in Russian jargon. In Belarusian, their output was factually more accurate. However, it showed internal inconsistency. The model mixed different orthographic systems and even produced hybrid forms. What we see here is not a random mistake. The model fails to produce a coherent account because it's trained on heterogeneous and often conflicting data. So in this sense, the inconsistency of the output reflects the instability of the standard itself. This kind of mixing between the official standard and Tarashkevitsa, and more broadly, the stigmatization of the official standard, is also visible in contemporary method discourse in social media. The experiment 2 tested what the default GPT model could provide, so whether the default GPT models could provide reliable grammatical feedback. So to reduce the risk of false output, I conducted the interpretation in English, since English is the model's strongest language. The test passage is taken from a foreword of a Belarusian literature textbook. So it's recommended for Belarusian schools in Poland. The passage contains two major errors: a punctuation error, a comma after. So I'll probably. Do you see the text, or should I read it? So it's like, добрий день, ви уже другий год з'являєтеся вучнями ліцея, перед вами чаргові випробування, много праці, однак не забувайте об тим, що гэта таксама час новых зустрэч з усім, што вас будзе акружала. So two errors: grammatical error, будзе окружала instead будзе окружать, and the comma after вы. So the grammatical error appears to result from Polish interference. I first asked GPT to identify the language and list the errors. It correctly recognized the text as Belarusian, but did not report any errors. And then supplied the rule for forming the Belarusian future tense and asked the model to apply it to the passage. It understood the rule, but still failed to detect their faulty form, Budia окружала. Only after I explicitly asked to recheck the answer did the model identify the error. And then, so it's identify and say, you're absolutely correct, to change that statement. After revising the results in the image, I realized that my early assessment was incorrect. So what is interesting about it, that then I asked the model to explain the error, and at first the model attributed the mistake to Russian interference. Only after I mentioned the author's Polish background did it revise the answer and recognize Polish interference and the most plausible source. So it's saying, oh, this adds a fascinating dimension to the analysis. If the text was written by a Pole, the error becomes much more understandable due to the influence of the Polish grammar on the author's Belarusian. So, and as a conclusion, so historical and political upheavals denied Belarus as a sustained period of sovereignty, fostering internal variation that complicated the language standardization. Although artificial intelligence can support low-resource languages such as Belarusian, the experiments show that its effectiveness is limited by two key factors, uneven training data and the absence of stable norms. In practice, GPT displays a secure weakness. It blends different standard varieties, overlooks grammatical and punctual errors, and tends to interpret Belarusian through a Russian-centric lens. Even when provided with explicit rules, the models struggle to apply them consistently and often produces overcorrected or contextually inaccurate explanations, reproducing existing biases in the available data. In this sense, the behavior of models such as ChatGPT reflects not only technical limitation, but the broader conditions of Belarusian itself, a language shaped by instability, competing norms, and unresolved scholarly debates. So artificial intelligence does not resolve this situation, it makes it visible. In this sense, contemporary technologies introduce a new layer into the history of Belarusian standardization. Control over language is no longer exercised primarily by speakers or state institutions, but increasingly mediated by algorithmic systems trained on large-scale, heterogeneous, and often uncurated data. So a possible long-term solution would be the development of independent language models based on controlled and high-quality Belarusian data. So this approach already explored in initiatives such as collaboration between the government of Iceland and OpenAI to preserve Icelandic language. However, this requires close collaboration with the linguistic community and systematic validation by native speakers. So thank you for your attention. I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Okay, our third speaker is Radzivon Kolas from the University of Warsaw, whose topic is the Trinity-Sergius manuscript of Symon Budny's Catechism towards the problem of linguistic adaptation.
Yeah. Well, I come to my screen. I hope everything is clear now in my presentation. Okay. Dear colleagues, thank you for you being here. The subject of my presentation today is the Trinity-Sergius manuscript of Symon Budny's Catechism toward the problem of linguistic adaptation. At the outset, I would like... Co się nie chce... slajdy. No dobrze. At the outset, I would like to outline the primary objective of this paper. First, this study serves as a filling of lacunae, specifically to clarify and refine the terminology currently employed in the field. The second, my intention is not to present a fundamental overhaul, but rather to highlight a series of nuances that warrant closer scholarly attention. At the thought, the necessity of this terminological is resentment by several highly specific assertion, frequently and counted in the academic literature. This we shall address shortly. Co się nie potrafię zobaczyć, dlaczego nie gartają się slajdy. Nie chcę, kiedy to nacisnę w tam. Okay. The manuscript under discussion has been frequently cited in Belarusian scholarship as having been discovered in the early 19th years. However, my research indicates that this manuscript has been now catalogued in since the later 19th century. A detailed analysis was originally conducted by Archimandrit Leonid Kavelin, who described the specific content of the volume in his catalogs. In the later 19th years, research essentially had to rediscover these previously well-established materials. Scholars such as Nikolai Prihodich and Tatsiana characterize this manuscript as a later 17th century translation of Symon Budny's Nesvish Catechism. However, well-received investigation has revealed several distinctive features that challenge this classification. Regarding the date of the manuscript creation, we can now attribute it to middle 40s years. The dating has been made possible through a rigorous analysis of the watermarks, filigrees present in the paper. The question of authorship and provenance also appeared to be resolved. The author of the manuscript is Ivan Nasietka, the keller of the Trinity-Sergius monastery in Moscow, a point I recently elaborate upon during the Natsan readings in Vilnius. It's precisely due to its place of origin, the Trinity-Sergius monastery in Moscow, that the manuscript bears its current name. The next slide. Okay, I must emphasize two crucial points. The first, this manuscript represents the only extant complete copy of the Nesvish Catechism. The second, the extensive and specific character of this marginal notes attest to the polemical context in which this manuscript was produced. Turning now to the result of linguistic analysis. When I first examined the manuscript, I was struck by the extraordinary degree of linguistic similarity to the original. I would argue that there are virtually no fundamental difference. I conduct a systematic page-by-page comparison of the Neswish edition and this manuscript. As you can see in this table on the slide, the left column contains in the text from the Neswish edition, and the right column shows the manuscript text. It is evident that the nature of the change points toward graphical adaptation and simplification. The script omits various diacritical marks and script. Crucially, we don't not observe the substantial textual modification that would qualify the work as a translation. The next aspect to consider is the presence of lexical replacements. This were, of course, inevitable and can be categorized into groups. The first group is case where a letter is omitted and the words is translate, orthographic adjustment. The second group is cases of complete word replacement. This change occur at both the graphical and semantic levels of adaptation and represent them closest the scribe comes to the concept of translation. Change at the morphological level, but a very limited group. This primarily involve adjustment to verbs, forms, and tenses, specifically with the aorist and other past tense construction. And the final level of adaptation involves orthographic substitution. In the manuscript, the use of the decimal I idicitirichne virtually disappears. Abbreviation under the title are phased out, and words are more written in full, in extenso. We observe a general simplification of spelling compared to the archaic forms of the 16th century. In conclusion, I wish to propose that when discussing the Trinity-Sergius manuscript of Symon Budny's Catechism, we should speak of the linguistic adaptation of the Ruthenian language, Jazyk Ruski, of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania for a readership in the Tsardom of Russia. Existing evidence of Symon Budny's correspondence with Moscow polemistics alongside this manuscript testifies to certain linguistic commonality across the East Slavic region. It demonstrates the mutual intelligibility of this tradition, which persists even a century after the original text publication. And to conclude my presentation, I would like to say that it is extremely important to treat terminology with care and to use it prudently. Research of this kind in the form of a case study helps to us to avoid both sweeping and often mistaken conclusion and cognitive generalization. And thank you very much for your attention and for the opportunity to share some of my observation.
Okay, our final presenter is Nikolai Shpilkov from the University of Siena, Italy, whose paper is entitled Governing Through Silence, Mnemonic, Populism, and the Lacunar Narrative in Belarusian Textbooks on 20th Century History from 2006 to 2025.
It's Nikolai. Yeah, like this. Thank you very much for having me here, and also for pronouncing my surname correctly. It's a rare thing in English-speaking world. In one of the Belarusian school history textbooks, the period from 1991 to 1994, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the declaration of Belarusian sovereignty, the first presidential elections, is compressed into a few sentences of abstract summarization. President Lukashenko does not appear as a candidate who won a contested election. He appears as a fact, as someone who is already there, as if so-called stability had always required him. His subsequent re-elections, including the constitutional referendum of 2004 that removed presidential term limits, are described collectively as strengthening stability in the country. This is what I mean by a lacunar narrative. Not a narrative that lies exactly, but one that governs through omission, through the structural placement of gaps, silences, and semantic foreclosures that together produce a particular world, one in which certain facts cannot be asked about because they have never been named, and certain critiques cannot be formed because the vocabulary for forming them is absent. My paper maps this narrative across a corpus of Belarusian state-issued history textbooks published between 2006 and 2019, and traces its evolution through the post-2020 period via preliminary analysis of new curricular instruments through 2025. The interpretive frame is mnemonic populism, developed by Polish-German scholar Cornelia Konczał from her analysis of the Polish Holocaust law. Mnemonic populism names the weaponization of historical memory to produce a populist friend and enemy world, a binary between a pure victimized people and an external or internal enemy that legitimizes authoritarian power. It is distinct from ordinary historical propaganda, which tends toward positive assertion. Mnemonic populism works as much through what it does not say as through what it says. This is why the concept is analytically well suited to the Belarusian curriculum. The most consequential operations of these textbooks are discursive operations of silence. I situate this within the framework of mnemonic governments by Hornzak and Keim, which attends to the full institutional apparatus, legislation, curricula, commemoration, through which the state shapes the social imaginary of the past. The school textbook is one node of this apparatus, but it is a particularly conceptual one, because it operates through the most authoritative genre of pedagogical discourse, the nationally approved, ministerially certified text that every school student in the country encounters. The core corpus consists of 4 textbooks for grades 10, 11, and 9, supplemented by the Ministry of Education curricular guidelines and the methodological apparatus embedded in each textbook volume. Review questions, summary tasks, documentary inserts. I read them through critical discourse analysis, attending specifically to lexical choices, narrative omissions, and the structuring of the pedagogical apparatus. The post-2019 extension draws on curricular regulations and two legislative instruments. The 2021 presidential decree establishing the Day of National Unity on 17 September and the 2022 law on genocide of the Belarusian people. These represent a qualitative shift in the mnemonic governance apparatus. I will return to them after the main analysis. 3 types of lacunae. I distinguish 3 types of lacunae that operates across this corpus of textbooks. The first is lexical silence, the systematic non-appearance of terms and the deliberate repositioning of others. The most striking case of non-appearance is the term totalitarian. It is absent from all 4 textbooks. The Stalinist repressions of the 1930s are mentioned, but without the analytical vocabulary available to name what kind of system produced them. The word does not appear to be avoided or replaced. It simply does not exist within the synthetic space of the curriculum. What does appear is consistently positive register, is ideology. In Panov 2019 textbook especially, ideology is not an analytic category, but an affirmative one. The student is told what the ideology of the Belarusian state is and positioned as someone who should embrace and internalize it. The lexical pairing is precise. The term that could name the system critically is absent. The term that forecloses criticism operates freely in its positive way. A related case is the semantic repositioning of national symbols. The white, red, white flag and the historical Pahonia coat of arms are not absent from the corpus. They appear in the chapters of the Great Patriotic War, where the textbooks report that wartime collaborators with the Nazi occupation, quote, used the historical Pahonia coat of arms and the white, red, white flag and greeted each other with the words, Живи Belarus, long live Belarus. The symbols are not prohibited, they are semantically loaded. By the cumulative architecture of the curriculum, they arrive in the reader's consciousness already marked, so that when they appear in other contexts, political or civic, the association has been pre-installed across years of schooling. The second type is narrative silence, the non-narration of historical periods or events. The post-Soviet transition is the largest narrative lacuna in the corpus, but 2 others deserve mention. The first is the Holocaust. It is present across editions. This distinguishes Belarus from some other post-Soviet curricula, for example, Russia. But it is systematically underdeveloped relative to both the scale of Jewish annihilation on Belarusian territory and the growing historiographic attention the subject has received, notably from David Marpos and Per Anders Rudling. The partisan narrative of the Great Patriotic War structurally crowds out the space that the history of Jewish, Polish, and Romani Belarusians might otherwise occupy, at least partly. The second is a Stalinist repression, present but confused. Neither the scale, nor the mechanism, nor the chain of political responsibility is coherently narrated. Students learn that something difficult happened. They are not giving the vocabulary or the facts to understand what it was. The third type is a structural silence. The silence is built into the pedagogical apparatus itself. The review questions that close each section nominally invite the student to formulate conclusions in their own words, but they do so within a discursive space that has already determined what conclusions are available. A question such as, what conclusions can be drawn about Belarus' foreign policy, operates in a chapter that has described foreign policy exclusively as a fragile multi-vector balance under great power pressure, and that contains no fact or figure that could generate any conclusion other than the country's position is precarious and requires strong central leadership. The apparatus simulates critical reflection while structurally foreclosing its possibility. The lacunae in the corpus of the textbooks is not static. The foreign policy sections are most conjectural. Their formulations shift between editions in response to the regime's evolving geopolitical position. For example, the Ganushenko and Novik early editions are notably more cautious about Russia then Panov 2019. The treatment of Poland grows steadily more negative across editions. What remains stable throughout is the underlying structure. The external environment is threatening, internal order is fragile, and the appropriate civic response is loyalty to the central authority. After 2020, the register shifts qualitatively. The 21st decree establishing 17th September as the Day of National Unity transforms the Liberating Campaign chapter of the textbooks, already the most ideology-loaded section of the curriculum, into a state holiday with its own annual commemorative practice, embedding the 1939 annexation narrative into civic time. The 2022 law on the genocide of the Belarusian people introduces a legally enforced narrative about Nazi-era violence that simultaneously establishes a discursive continuity between historical perpetrators and contemporary political opponents of the regime. Denial of the genocide becomes a criminal offense. The definition of what constitutes the genocide is controlled by the state. What the post-2020 period shows is that the Lacunar narrative does not remain fixed when it's challenged. It intensifies. The silences grow louder. And they acquire legal enforcement mechanisms that were not previously available. The 2020 protests demonstrated that the civic imagination the curriculum had worked to narrow was not, in fact, narrowed. Hundreds of thousands of people who had studied from these textbooks found themselves able to name what the textbooks had not named, to carry symbols the textbooks had preloaded with negative associations, and to articulate political alternatives the textbooks had rendered literally unavailable. The regime's response, the Day of National Unity is a genocide law, the prosecution of independent historians and teachers, was, among other things, a response to that demonstration. It acknowledged implicitly that governing through silence had not been sufficient. The harm the Lacunar narrative does is difficult to document precisely because it operates through absence, through what was not learned, what could not be named, what could not be asked. That difficulty is also, I think, the reason the research is worth doing. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank our presenters for four very thought-provoking presentations. And so it looks like we have now about, I guess, at least 25 minutes for questions and discussion. Actually, I think before opening the questions and discussion to the audience, I'd like to invite the panelists themselves to perhaps respond briefly to each other's papers or to comment on any broader connections that they see emerging from today's session. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you could pass the mic, one of the mics, maybe.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ethan Berger, and I have a very ethnocentric question triggered by something that Curt said to me outside, which is on my mother's side are people who are from what is now Belarus, though they never described it as such during their lives, and they immigrated to the States in 1905. They were all people that spoke Russian, Polish, Yiddish, German, Hebrew, I guess. No one spoke Belarusian. So I always, I have to apologize, regarded Belarusian language as a unifying force as being sort of almost mythological, except, I sort of changed that view from reading the work of David Marples, and his last book is really good about that. Because I never thought of Belarus as justifying a country. I thought of it as just being an oblast, which Lukashenko didn't want to hand over to Russia. But I realize that's a misconception. So I'm wondering, with respect to language and Jews that lived in what forms Belarus today, how widespread was language use? Was my grandparents unusual in simply thinking that, or simply had a life that did not require them to know Belarusian? As I said, this is a very ethnocentric question, but I have no one else to ask. or no one else who would care to answer.
Have a couple questions, or should we deal with this one?
Yeah, I think actually let's maybe have a couple more questions. Yeah.
Anyone in the room? Sure.
Vital Byl, University of Bonn. I have a question to Radzivon. It's really curious to see this manuscript written almost a century after its publishing, and as you say, if I understand correctly, for Muscovy. So, because ideas of Symon Budny was not mainstream even among his coreligionists, his Polish brethren. So I wonder who, in which context this manuscript was created, who needed this century-old writing of Symon Budny, for what purpose? Maybe for discussion, and is it indeed for Muscovy context, or maybe rather for this Kievan Academy that was at the moment actively engaged in polemics with Protestants, and as far as I know, from my limited knowledge, I was more actively interested in such kind of context. Can we say something more about the context of this curious text? Thank you.
Yeah, one more.
He's not with us.
Hi. Should I ask a question? Hi, I'm Dasha Lis from Queen Mary University. I have a question to Tatsiana and to Nikolai. Tatsiana, you mentioned what I understood that basically AI speaks Tracianka. And then you said that to teach it to speak Belarusian, we have the controlled data. And you mentioned it at the end. Can you expand a little bit? How can this work in practice? Like, how do we produce, or who controls, who manages selection and other steps of the process to teach the AI to speak Belarusian? And to Nikolai, the question is, thank you for fascinating sort of description of silences. You identify a few, I guess, historical concepts that are silenced and in a representation of history. Is there any historical figures that are particularly changed or altered or silenced in textbooks through this process?
Okay, and then we'll let our I think, yeah, let's maybe have our presenters answer these first questions, then we'll have another round of questions from the audience, right? Or
if I may, my question is somewhat of a follow-up for the question we've just heard to Tatsiana, on the more perhaps technical viewpoint. How do we direct, for example, the likes of DeepL to be more careful in not amalgamating all Slavic languages into one silo and speaking Tracianka across Belarusian, Ukrainian, what have you, a bit of Polish? Perhaps they can be directed a bit. I'm somewhat involved in this, being a linguist, with working a lot with all the new tools, of course. And maybe universities, since we haven't got a chance like the government of Iceland, the Belarusian government is not yet commissioning such studies, but perhaps universities should take the lead. Thank you very much.
okay. Okay, yeah, so let's have our presenters respond, and then we'll take some more questions from the audience.
Maybe give it to one of the presenters.
Oh, okay, so who would like to respond first?
I can respond.
Okay, there you go.
AI questions. So the main problem of what we have today in Belarus, that OpenAI restricted all possibilities to use ChatGPT on the territory of Belarus. So it was not the decision of the Belarusian government. It was not decision of Belarus itself. It was the decision of the OpenAI to restrict the usage. Of course, it's possible to use AI using VPN and all other sources, but direct usage is forbidden. The same situation with Claude and all these modern and so more or less reliable tools. So this is the problem number one, and that is why the Academy of Science, the Institute of the Belarusian Language, cannot speak directly to OpenAI, because OpenAI doesn't want this cooperation. So that is why it's very difficult to control what data they use to help AI study Belarusian language. Moreover, if we speak about ChatGPT, it's so they keep all the data in secret. It's not only the Belarusian language. So actually, that is why Musk do not want to continue working with them, because they do not show data. So what data they use, it concerns not only linguistic, it concerns all spheres. So it is possible to control the AI a bit, because there is a function, there is a possibility to make a default variant of AI, to use restrictions, to use particular rules, but you should control every step, because so it's very easy to lose the control and to get a wrong answer. So they launched a new version of ChatGPT 5.5, and I also tried last week. I tried to conduct a kind of research. It's based on the also Instagram comments, YouTube comments, and posts in Belarusian. And it concerns their stylistic peculiarities. In particular, so it's also Russian Belarusian influence. So in particular, we have different cases after the different verbs. For example, смеяться над и сдековаться, смеяться с. So it's very easy for GPT to confuse and to change the case. Moreover, it's very easy for people to change or to use the wrong case. And it's interesting that the answer of GPT, why they use it, so it explains it nowadays that it's because there is a possibility for the people who live in the eastern regions to use this Russian-oriented variant. So it's just like the explanation of GPT. He said that, okay, two variants are possible. That is why I say that this is a new layer of standardization when it says like this, and so we cannot control it. So it's just like the users receive this information and they probably believe it. So yes, there is no control, unfortunately, but I agree that probably the institution should try to do it somehow. I don't know. That's also the financial question.
And it's much harder for non-native speakers, for example,
Exactly.
Google Translate.
Exactly, they use it constantly.
Robotic option.
So if you speak about Instagram comments, it is more interesting, because after the launch of GPT, after the appearance of GPT, it's quite vivid that they use machine translation or GPT translation to write comments, because the errors are very common that we see in ChatGPT. So that is why it's not the government, it's not nowadays the linguists that control it. It's just like AI that control the standardization of the language, and especially if we speak about the so low resource languages as Belarusian.
Positive side, we can weed out the bots.
Yeah. Thank you.
Would you like to respond? Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Speaking of the Soviet and post-Soviet history, and these textbooks were about this period in high grades, the most amount of omissions is the history of collaboration, because these evil collaborators using the white, red, white flags, they are not named. These are just people. Who are they? What they were standing for? Nothing. Just a pure evil. And the second is also about the first years of independence, because neither Zenon Pozniak nor Vyacheslav Kebich, no one of them is mentioned. It's just Lukashenko appears from nowhere and saving everything. And even the history of the reforms of the first years of independence is like some abstract people came, ruined everything, and everyone is dying from hunger. Then comes Lukashenko, makes the perfect economical reforms and stability. It looks like this, and I'm not even like making it fun. It is really like this, and in any of the textbooks, but there are special textbooks by, if I'm not mistaken, Novik, who is a very big fan of Soviet Union, and he not just making these omissions, he is also starting telling about how great the Soviet Union was, how sad that we lost it, and so on and so on. But the interesting fact, I think 2 or 3 years ago, his textbooks stopped being used in schools. So I think this like pure pro-Soviet line now is not a mainstream through the officials. Thanks.
Yes. Would you, Alena, would you like to respond?
Do you speak to me?
I thought you raised your hand, no?
Oh.
Okay. I have a.
Yes, I have had my hand.
Yes.
So would you like to say what you wanted to say?
Yes, I have a question to Kolas, but I see it is impossible. And I have a short comment to this referat from Natalia, from my colleague about ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. First of all, for me, is no problem with Belarusian mistakes in communication with artificial intelligence, maybe because I use another artificial intelligence, especially Gemini. And as I know, and Google Translation is perfect with Belarusian. From every language, not every, but many languages, English, Belarusian, Russian, Belarusian, Polish, Belarusian, no problems. And when I speak with my Gemini in Belarusian, I hear not mistakes too. And one more comment. And why do you think when somebody writes comment, for example, in Instagram with mistake that is ChatGPT? I think that mistakes are more common for living beings, not for ChatGPT. And the second one, as I know, in Belarus now, owing to these restrictions, another chat, especially Chinese artificial intelligence, is in use, and it is good enough. It shows us the results of these restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, exactly. DeepSeek is used nowadays in Belarus. Actually, I do not work with it. That's why I cannot comment. So speaking about the mistakes, probably I did not deal with a large data, but it's not me, but the developers of the corpus of the Belarusian language that consider that it's time to put a synchronic corpus on hold. So they say they probably found some reasons that they see what there is online is not Belarusian but Russian with Belarusian words. So they put it nowadays and stop. and they blame ChatGPT together with the machine translation of that situation. So probably if we speak about particular text or small text, machine translation works perfectly, but not always. So I cannot comment on all examples, but that is the case. They stop the corpus. So we don't.
They not only, excuse me, they not only stop the corpus, but they destroy it because a lot of texts were taken away from it. I know it perfectly.
So, I cannot comment on that, but I cannot comment only that they described it and they explain it due to the fact that there is not enough text on the Belarusian language. A kind of mixture. So that is why I read in their article they published in 2024.
It depends on sources. They can't use all kinds of sources.
Probably. So I cannot comment it.
Any question?
Yes, thank you. I have a question and a comment to Alena. Maybe the comment first. Thank you very much for your paper. As I was listening to it, I was thinking that we must invite you here, or we do invite you here, and hopefully when you come, you will see the illustrations to your paper in our museum. And the concept of our new museum is very much focused on multi-linguism, multi-ethnicity, and various confessions in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. So it was wonderful to hear to your paper because I know exactly the examples I could show to illustrate your talk. But the question is now, how does that phenomenon compare between the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Polish Crown? Is there the same level of the use of hybrid texts in the Polish territory? Thank you.
It's a very good question. Thank you. It's a very interesting question because as for me, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was earlier in these hybrid texts. In Poland and in Commonwealth, hybrid texts became widespread later. Maybe after this federation in 1569, yeah. So, but now certainly Polish humanitarians say that Poland always was multi-ethnic and multi-linguistic.
Okay, we have about...
Is it an answer for your question?
Thank you very much.
We have about 4 minutes, looks like, so maybe a couple more questions. Anyone?
Karolina,
If there's no one else. Yeah, okay. I have a question for Tatsiana. How do you think the recent interest in publishing texts in dialects can impact on the AI algorithm, and whether those forms, those linguistic forms, can be included in the AI translation? For instance, at Skaryna Press, we are now publishing a poetry collection by Larissa Geniusz in the original form, in the Gorodnia dialect. Would that, do you think, be included in the algorithms?
I'm sorry.
I think so. There is a very high chance that it will be as if it's online, because as I told already. So if you speak about low resource languages, ChatGPT normally use all online data that are available. And if they are available, if they are online, of course, they can be used. So the thing is, if this proportion or so the amount of this text enough to influence, to make any influence of ChatGPT answers. It's also about the proportion. So but it concerns not only the language. So if we speak about some general topics or social topics, sometimes ChatGPT in different phases, in different months are answered differently. So the explanation is that it receives the data, so another portion of data, and that the answers have been changed. So it's just like he is not thinking, so he just follows the algorithm systems, and it's about the balance. So if ChatGPT or any AI system receive enough high quality text in Belarusian, of course all answers will be perfect. Of course, all cultural information also will be correct. So it always depends on this, and unfortunately, we cannot just in this point we cannot control it completely. And probably we just missed the first comment and the first question. Yes, concerning the language. So may I just comment? If I'm not mistaken, it was about that not so many people speak Belarusian or use Belarusian daily, and it's your it was your kind of PT or.
United States, no one speaks Belarusian at all, including the people that came, for World War I, as well as all the Soviet immigrants, all of whom were from cities, and so that I would use my perception, but they may be totally wrong, that Jews who are from Belarus feel limited affinity to Belarus, as opposed to they may have friends still in Belarus. But it's different, and so when for example, I used to write for the Belarus Review, and those people, are mostly, are Christians, and I'm trying to figure out, understand the sociology of it is probably the way. Is that an accurate way of describing it?
So
Well,
yeah,
I would say that among the more recent emigres from Belarus, there are a fair number of Jews who speak Belarusian. The klezmer musician Zisa Slepovich in New York City, from Minsk originally, speaks fluent Belarusian as well as Yiddish.
And in Berlin too, I know a lot of such people.
The language is critical. For example, Zelensky is a Russian speaker, and he had to learn, and he was Jewish, and he had to learn Ukrainian so he can speak with a Russian accent. It's just politically it's a very political thing for him. He's best known for having a comedy show, which was in Russian. And so language matters politically to a lot of people, and it's the context.
Certainly. Okay, well, I think, we're about out of time. So just like to thank all our presenters and our wonderful audience, successful panel.
Thank you very much. And now we have another short book launch. And I would like to invite Igor Ivanov and Hanna Koma to tell us more.
Another book launch.
If you could leave your mic.
Oh, yes. Won't be any.
Насідай там, а ми книжечку поставимо посередині, добре? Чудовненько. Я почну.
Дякую. Давай.
І тобі дам слово. Тобі дам слово.
It's good to have your publisher
Taken care
of you and the book.
Hello, colleagues. Hello, friends. My name is Igor Ivanov. and Hanna Kommer is with me. We both are from Skaryna Press Publishing House, which was established in 2022 here in London. So it's our fourth year of existence. And Hanna is both on the editorial board and as one of our key authors of our publishing
But
house.
because it's not that I'm not published here because I'm on the editorial board. Don't get it wrong.
We had to fight for her book. And today the occasion today is that Hanna's book of prose, which originally appeared in 2024,
2 years ago, yeah.
in 2024, under the title Kaliya Vydu na Volyu, appeared just a few weeks ago, appeared in English, When I'm Out of Here, Staying Human in a Dictator's Jail. Hanna, on her website, Hanna describes herself as a poet and a PhD student. I think I checked a few days ago. That's what it was there. But Hanna actually, she writes also drama, and that's her book of prose as well. So quite multi-format author. When this book appeared 2 years ago, I think for quite a few people it was a surprise. They got used to you being a poet. What did happen? Why did you decide to write a book of prose, and what this prose is about?
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very good lead to a conversation. What happened is I was jailed for 9 days in Belarus in 2020, as 50,000 of us have. And that was a deeply traumatic experience. And also the experience that it was a flashback to my childhood experience of violence at home. And which both so when I was I was detained for 9 days for peaceful demonstration. And I was writing a diary. A friend of mine sent me a notebook with a care package, and I was writing a diary because I thought, well, I'm a writer. This is a unique experience, because we obviously thought it was going to be over soon. And I thought, well, it's going to be over in a couple of months. We'll win, it will just be in the past. But this is a unique experience as a writer, being there inside of it. I can write about it. And so I was writing kind of prison diary. And then when I was out, I couldn't write. I thought, well, I'd be able to maybe develop the prison diary or anything, but I couldn't write anything more about it. It was, in fact, so traumatic that it just blocked me. And then I thought, is it just really only my experience? Of course not. It's a collective experience. And on that day, when I was arrested, there were also a lot of women arrested, purposefully, basically. And that was a very kind of important turning point when the patriarchy that was playing in our favor, women, without because the police would not arrest us initially on purpose. On that day, it all changed. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping between the topics, but basically, I was inspired also by Svetlana Alexievich, because I was listening to the audiobook of hers, The Unwomanly Face of War. To understand how the women's experiences of these catastrophes, basically, yeah. And then I realized, okay, I don't have to tell the story on my own, because it's not only my story. Second, it is a collective experience. And I started looking for a form that would then incorporate my personal experience and the collective experience. And so this book then has my prison diary in red. If you look at the layout, it has the red text and the black text. So the red text is my prison diary, which is presented in proper grammar because it was a written text. And then I interviewed other people who, both men and women, but mostly women, who were also on the kind of side of detention, the protesting that night, but say some of them were released, let go, and they came back home to their families. then those with whom we spent, like we were in the same police vans and police stations, and then in Okrestina and Zhodina. And then mostly my friends who were outside the prison walls, calling the courts, trying to find us, trying to get the care package, sending messages, supporting each other. And so those were oral interviews. And I thought I found this way of conveying, kind of transforming the oral speech into written speech. So the black text here is all the other voices. And those have almost no punctuation, except for full stops and a couple of question marks. Instead of like commas or columns, there are like shorter or longer spaces between words, dependent on the pauses that people actually saw, would actually listen to multiple times of those interviews, and I would, put the spaces shorter, longer. And you can see speech is so fragmented. This is not how we would read those spaces that sometimes seem to make no sense, because they're like, oh, well, this doesn't feel right, but this is what we do when we speak, right? Especially when we speak about something very emotional and maybe traumatizing or very disturbing, or that had a great impact on us. I don't know if I think
no, it's very good.
This all,
Hannah,
yeah.
Also, I just noticed there are, well, I know the answer, but just maybe to explain that there are some, what it's called,
Blackouts.
Plashki, reduction.
Reductions.
What are they?
Reductions, of course, because the original book, the problem that when people appear in photos from the protests, for example, then they're charged with by like they're found by the police and they face consequences. So I didn't want any names to appear. I didn't want anyone who I interviewed to be in any way traced back and face the consequences. So all the names and people's names, the names of police departments, anything, that could lead to a person, it was redacted. Okay. And even in the PDF, because we have a PDF that's sold as well, it's just gibberish. So behind the blackout, there is no real name. It's just a set of letters, just in case, someone decides to.
Yeah. Who knows when they come for us? Would you mind to read something, small fragment?
Yeah, I just want to say that although it's called Staying Human, that's a subtitle, Staying Human in the Dictator's Jail. The book is basically about not only how you stay human, but also how you become a better human, surprisingly. Because you think, well, what's 9 days? But in those 9 days, it's like you live a life, another life. And thanks to the people around me, and that was a shared collective experience, we really became better people, and we learned a lot, particularly how to take care of each other. For example, we're sharing literally everything: food, hygienic products, clothes, stories, books, and here's about it. I didn't see things as mine. It was all shared. When we arrived, we were unpacking, and maybe on the second day, we decided to sort things so that everything had its own place. And somehow we began to put everything in one place, because anyway, we kept it all together on the table, the food and stuff, so our personal things became shared. We also had common shelves with pens and paper, toilet rolls, and some household supplies. Well, because again, some received a care package, others didn't. And you didn't want to be stingy in those conditions. We had a shelf purely for books. Everyone put out what they had, because some girls read very quickly, and we exchanged books. So it was easier to put everything in one place for some kind of order.
Okay. Do you think this book is, how would you describe the book? Is it a book about suffering, book of suffering, book of no?
No.
Book of
I mean, the first, it's divided into days, eight days. The first day is a lot of suffering, because it was detention. It was so long and so just tedious, and just it's probably the most difficult part. But you may be surprised, but it's funny sometimes, and it becomes funnier till like the closer to the release date, the funnier it gets. because I interviewed some of my friends, and they were really, they have a great sense of humor, and you know, we each have a different way of dealing with those kind of situations, of coping. And for some people, it's humor. And so even the most ridiculous, those like so-called trials via Skype where you don't hear anything, and there is this verdict already prepared, or then the conversation with the prison staff, or then when my friends were waiting for me to get out of there, and they were talking to the like prison, even what do you call him, not director, the main guy. It's like, it's really funny the way they they describe it, which is really great. So it's in no way about suffering. It's actually a very warm book. My part for me is most painful, you know. But otherwise, yeah, it's a book about solidarity.
Book about solidarity, fantastic. Is it? Why did we decide to publish it in English?
Why did we decide?
Why not to keep it to us, the Belarusians, our own experience?
Yes, because we actually don't position it as just a Belarusian book. If you look at the UK situation, there've been like freedom of protest. Things are not really so great. People are arrested for peacefully demonstrating on the street.
It's not as bad here as
it's not about as bad.
United States. Have a look.
A friend of mine has his friend who is an environmental activist, and every year they used to hold this kind of demonstrations and be arrested. So the police would beforehand call her and ask, how many people are there going to be? Because are there vegans around among you, or are there vegetarians? You know, we want to prepare food for you. So obviously it's different. But you think like this, lots of people of different age are like have been arrested at pro-Palestinian actions, and they just same people like us, you know, they care about something and they don't deserve
and dictatorships, they learn from each other. We should learn from our experience, the experience of other people. Hanna, thank you very much. Hanna will be hanging out. I'll be hanging out over lunch. We can continue this conversation. Thank you very much. I have some books, this book and other books of Hanna. If you're interested, come around.
Thank you.
Thank you.